because I remember when I left He-Man, for example, I got a call from a writer saying, look, we're having a lot of problems with the Berenstains. They're very unhappy with our scripts. They want to pull the show from CBS and not even let it get on the air. They just, I don't know what, we were trying everything we could think of, and they just hate all of our scripts. So I said, all right, I'll write one, and I wrote a script for Berenstain Bears, CBS Saturday Morning, and the Berenstains liked it so much that they flew out from their home, their farm in Pennsylvania, to meet this guy. That's how impressed they were with my 30-minute Berenstain Bears script. And I met with them, and they made me the story editor of the show because they liked my work so much. So, what was I trying to say? I was very good at working with difficult performers, in sitcom days or otherwise. I just know how to fix things and do things. As a story editor, I would take scripts that were rejects and make a few little changes, and then they were liked. I remember a friend of mine was George Atkins, who wrote, if you go way back, the Bullwinkle cartoons, Rocky and Bullwinkle. Mm-hmm. And he started his career writing these cartoons, Fractured Flickers, all of those things. And then he had a big live-action career writing all kinds of shows, from drama to sitcoms, such as All in the Family and all of that. Then one year he said, all of a sudden he got work one after another. He just could not get work at a certain point. He reached an age level where they were just hiring people who were a little younger than he was, and he couldn't get a job writing. So I said, well, let's see if you can write Berenstain Bears. And I told the Berenstains that I got this Bullwinkle writer, and he'd like to try, after all these years, getting back into cartoons. Says, sure. Well, his first script he turned in was awful. It was unproducible, and the Berenstains hated it. I said, well, let me just make a few changes. And that's what I did. I took his existing script, made a few adjustments in it, not a whole lot, but I straightened out some screwy whatever it was, I don't remember, and they loved it, and he went on to write all kinds of cartoon scripts, Scooby-Doo for Hanna-Barbera, tons of cartoons. So I was able to get this writer who was so funny, but just needed a story editor to manage his decisions as far as plot and things, and straighten a few things out, and gave him a career that he was able to use until he finally was ready to retire. So my point was, what was my point? I'm just trying to say I was very good at cartoons, but I was really tired of it all, of writing, having deadlines and all of that. So I was always interested in computers. I used to train writers how to use computers. I was in the Writers Guild forum running that in the early days. And I just got more and more interested in e-commerce. So now when I'm building a website for someone who has an online store, as soon as they hear I used to write He-Man or Ninja Turtles, that sometimes closes the deal. So, oh, wow, we want you to do our store because you wrote those are my favorite cartoons. It's kind of funny. Sometimes I'll be having a very serious discussion with a client, discussing, what they want to do about their e-commerce site. And before I hang up, they say, by the way, I really liked, the Giant Irma episode you wrote for Ninja Turtles, So it's kind of funny how these shows I wrote, years ago that are still popular with some of my clients. So comedy is rather interesting. It affects people in many ways. When I was at a He-Man convention this last year, and people would be coming up to me, sometimes with tears in their eyes, saying that He-Man childhood. Maybe they were being bullied in school or had parents who were not very good parents, and they were lonely. They'd come home every day at 5 o'clock or whatever it aired on their location, and they'd see our cartoons and this nice big man that was friendly, He-Man, and all the other characters, the young women who felt empowered by She-Ra. It was shocking. I was there with another writer at this table, and we say, here comes another one. You could see the teary-eyed fan, and sometimes bringing their own children, saying how my infamous episode of The Greatest Show on Eternia, which some diehard He-Man fans despised because it was so funny and silly. It said that was their favorite episode, or just in some cases prevented a suicide. There was one person that came up and said they were ready to, a kid, who was so bullied and unhappy at home, they were thinking of killing themselves. He-Man, they came to thank us for saving their lives, and we were just, me and my friend Robbie London, who was at the same table, we were stunned that what we wrote basically for a living. I mean, we were trying to write good things, but we never thought we were having that kind of an impact on a child. We were stunned beyond belief. So, in the case of Laughing, people who remember the show were still around 50 years ago, but who just love the show, and I'm a hero when I go into the Roder Martin's Facebook fan club website and tell them some of the stories from those days. So, people can still break into show business, particularly comedy. If you can make somebody laugh, that's proof that you're writing something funny. Whereas with drama, I don't know, anybody can write drama as far as I'm concerned, I'm sure there's more to it than that, but comedy writer, lots of writers would start as writers and end up being the producers. That's kind of what happens. You start as a writer, and then the next year you become maybe an associate producer, then you're a co-producer. You look at some of the shows on TVs now, and you'll see there are lots of producers, and usually they came from a writer's background who when their contract times to be renewed on a hit show, say, okay, we'll come back, but we got to have a co-producer title. So you work your way up. That's pretty much how it is these days. Mm-hmm. So proof is to get the audience laughing, and then your goal, as far as comedy writing is concerned.
Yeah. Exactly, and you have to get into the business if you truly love it, if you enjoy doing comedy writing or, Yeah,
it just was sort of inevitable looking back. But, in school, when my parents heard I was interested in getting into show business, that was, a horror to hear such a thing, Parents are so concerned that their kids, go to regular college, I was never college material. My grades were barely C, maybe C+, maybe towards the end, some Bs. I was really not interested in, I wanted to get out of school. I didn't want to continue. And they were, they grew up in the Depression, my parents, and they worked hard with ordinary jobs that, took money. And they, a lawyer or a dentist or anything like that. But here I was, doing school plays and all that. But when I became, a big comedy writer, they were in the audience. They always wanted to be in the audience when one of my shows was being produced, in front of a live audience. So my success changed their opinion of show business because I actually had a successful career. Always working one show or another, from variety, sitcoms, game shows, Hollywood Squares, cartoons. I even wrote some material for Universal for Epcot for when they were building Epcot back at Disney World many years ago, and so I wrote all kinds of stuff because I was good at that. Whereas some of my variety show friends, when variety disappeared, they sometimes had trouble finding work, but I was able to do Hollywood Squares and a lot of game shows. So I was lucky. I was so flexible.
Yeah. Yeah, the entertainment businesses can be very enjoyable. You know, anything you do in the industry can be very rewarding.
Wonderful. Particularly when you're on a show where you're on staff. When I was writing Alice, that show about the restaurant, we had a real restaurant built at the Warner Brothers stage. It was a set, and there was always food in the refrigerator. We could go down and eat unless there was a note on it, "Don't touch, this is a prop," you know. But we would go down and sit there and grab some food if we wanted. It's a big, wonderful family on the Alice show, really, with Bob Carroll and Madeline Davis running the show, who were from Lucy. They ran a real excellent production company. They knew, of course, there were wonderful stories about I Love Lucy that I would, keep bugging them about. Finally, they said, "Rowby, we don't look backwards, we look forward," Yeah. But it was still hard not to ask about, this and that about I Love Lucy. And some of the I Love Lucy directors worked on the show. Mark Daniels, who directed the pilot, was one of our directors on Alice. Bill Asher, who later did Bewitched and was married to the star of Bewitched, he was one of our directors on Alice. We had rotating directors, we had 3 or 4. So it was great to talk to Mark Daniels about how they set up the original 4-camera. Originally it was 4 cameras, so they changed it to 3 multi-camera setup for I Love Lucy, and it was just great to meet these very well-trained people. And then when I was writing on Tony Orlando, our head writers were Hal Goldman and Hal Goldman and Hal Goodman, who were writers for the Jack Benny show. They were kids when they were writing on Jack Benny, but then years later they were often brought on to shows like Tony Orlando to be the head writers, and they told me Jack Benny stories. And so I learned from the greats that came before me, and had a wonderful, great family in most of these shows, particularly Alice. That was everybody, the stage manager, the cast, the writers. It was a very family. We had a really nice family there on that show.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Goren, it's been a real pleasure talking to you and hearing about your career, and thank you very much.
Yes, and then you'll let me know when this is going to air sometime.
Oh, yes, I'll send you a link so you can listen to it.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. It was sort of fun giving you a mini version of my, I guess my writing career lasted about 30 years, 25, 30 years, and I started doing other things. Okay, thanks a lot. It was fun.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. And that was comedy writer Mr. Rowby Goren. Thank you very much for listening, and God bless you all.